53 in the Workbook of A Course in Miracles. This is a review of the first 50 lessons, and now we're covering lessons 11 through 15. Let's look at the practice instructions that were in the introduction or in the review for these lessons. What we want to do is take 2 minutes or more for each period, thinking about the ideas and the related comments after reading them. The practice is that once in the morning and then in the evening we read and review all five, and then throughout the day we practice as often as we can. And we need to do each of these lessons at least once, and if one of them sticks out for us as more valuable, then we focus on that one, just making sure we do all five at least once. Okay, so the practice is here in this paragraph. It is not necessary to cover the comments that follow each idea literally or thoroughly in the practice periods. Try rather to emphasize the central point and think about it as part of your review of the idea to which it relates. And after you've read the idea and the related comments, the exercise should be done with your eyes closed and when you're alone in a quiet place if possible. So the goal here is to find times when we're free to practice, where there'll be no distractions, so that we're ready to be able to use these ideas throughout the day and throughout our lives as needed and in all ways. So that's the practice instructions. So the idea is to recognize that it's natural to think with love rather than to think from fear. And this is the purpose of time now, is to come into the real world, which is the same world that we're seeing now from the ego, but it's a world in which love is the way in which we interpret the events, that forgiveness is always justified, and we see through love's eyes instead of fear. That's what the Course means by the real world. It might be useful to remember from chapter 15 the purpose of time, that it started out two uses of time. One is the egos and one is the Holy Spirit's. And from the Holy Spirit's standpoint, the purpose of time is this: can you imagine what it means to have no cares, no worries, no anxieties, but to be perfectly calm and quiet all the time? Yet that is what time is for, to learn just that and nothing more. God's teacher cannot be satisfied with his teaching until it constitutes all your learning. He has not fulfilled his teaching function until you become such a consistent learner that you learn only of him. When this has happened, you will no longer need a teacher or time in which to learn. Another reference in the text is this beautiful paragraph from chapter 5 that says, "How can you who are so holy suffer? All your past except its beauty is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. I have saved all your kindness and every loving thought you ever had. I have purified them of the errors that hid their light and kept them for you in their own perfect radiance." So this is the idea that we come into the awareness of the contents of our minds and we turn it over to the Holy Spirit, and he retranslates all of our fear thoughts into calls for love that are answered. And so our only experience is the real world and the world of love. Okay, so here's today's lessons, lesson 53. We're reviewing these 5 thoughts. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. A meaningless world engenders fear. God did not create a meaningless world, and my thoughts are images that I have made. So the practice is, let's go to this one here, my meaningless thoughts. So the practice is to take these ideas and place them in the mind and let the mind use them as it sees fit. That it's the recognition that our true mind, our real thoughts, The natural mind is one of loving thoughts, and that if you place these ideas in the thought, place these thoughts that we're practicing in these lessons, that the mind will automatically recognize them. It'll find resonance within our own minds of our loving nature, of our loving thoughts. So, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. One of the ways the Course describes its teaching is that and teaching around time is that its purpose is to save you time. In other words, so to shorten the time that you have your lessons. And so we learn, as we mentioned in 15, that the purpose of time is to just learn to be perfectly peaceful. So how would that work in a lesson like this? My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. Well, once when I did this lesson, uh, an example of how it can save us time is that we've internalized, for instance, a lot of values of the ego of what's a meaningful life and what's a purposeful life. So for instance, when I was growing up, I, my parents used to describe me as an obstinate little shit, and I was always raising concerns about this or that, or questioning the values of the family. And so, what I internalized was, not to question, to be quiet. It's safe to stay in the background, and a lot of decisions I made were based upon that. To try and actualize that value. Well, there was something wrong with that value, and so now how I save time is to see that ego value bubbling up and recognizing what it's leading to, and not allowing that to animate my decisions. In other words, I see the purpose of that thought. I realize it's not one that I share. It's not a value that I want to actualize. And so I can make clear decisions about what I'm going to do or what I'm going to think. And so, recognizing that it's a meaningless thought and that it's showing me this world, uh, I don't need to be quiet to keep myself safe or stay in the background. That's not what the way the world really works. That's an internal value that I've made up. So it can save time. It could save years of time in some of the big decisions we make. So that's an example of how uh, the Course's lessons will save us time. We'll recognize inside of us the values that we're trying to actualize, and see where they're coming from the ego, and say, I'm just not going to go there. I'm not going to seek that kind of thing. That's not the way the world works. That's just my thoughts. And so I'm free to make a decision. So that's just one example of how I use this lesson. So read through these and just place the ideas in your mind and see what comes up. And our guide to what we know is true is that if the thought brings peace or joy or love, then that's a true thought. That's something that we can rely upon. Those are, like it says uh, in this lesson, that reality is not insane, and I have real thoughts as well as insane ones, and I can therefore see the real world if I look to my real thoughts as my guide for seeing. So we can see this real world, which is a world in which forgiveness is always justified, and it's always therefore a world of peace, of joy, and love, and that's the world that we can see. So practice well, and let's look to the results. Expect the results, expect a miracle. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you.